in. Welcome everyone. We are thrilled that you are here with us this afternoon. And we're excited to get started on our next drop in School Leader PD. So just so you get a sense of who we are, we wanted to introduce ourselves first and some of the other facilitators that you'll see today from TNTP. My name is Rhiannon and I'm a senior manager here at TNTP. The other facilitator for today is Brittany Hine, and I will allow her to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm Brittany. I'm also a senior manager here at TNTP. And I'm looking forward to talking about math with y'all today.
Great. Fun fact about Brittany and I is we actually both are on the DESE Gleam project as well, if you have heard of that. So Brittany and I are actually both traveling right now for Gleam. So I am Zooming to you from New Bedford. And Brittany, you are Zooming from Everett today?
I'm Zooming from Everett. Yes, I have in Everett School District today. It was wonderful.
Yeah, so we're here in Massachusetts with you today. So that's a fun fact for today's session. You'll also see a few other TNTP staff members here who will be supporting facilitation, particularly in breakout rooms today. We have Margaret Bruce, Katie Buckland, Greg Leap, Jacob Michaelman, and Donna Anderson Davis. So you'll see them. They have the cool TNTP background, so you'll be able to see that they are here. And they will be, like I said, supporting the discussion today. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our sixth session of our Drop-In School Leader PD learning series on learning acceleration. Today, we are going to be focusing on accelerating learning in mathematics through best instructional practices. Before we dive into our learning for today, we'll spend a few minutes orienting ourselves to how we'll spend our time together this afternoon. So as many of you already know, DESE and TNTP partnered earlier this year on the creation of the acceleration roadmaps to provide guidance and recommendations to educators around these three overarching priorities for accelerating learning this school year. Today, our learning will highlight critical practices around the third priority, which is to ensure strong grade-appropriate instruction with just-in-time scaffolds where they are needed. The emphasis today will specifically focus on the first part of this priority, which is ensuring whether or not instruction is truly grade appropriate. So ensuring that acceleration is happening instead of remediation. And before we dive in, we wanted to thank you all for making time during your busy day to be present with us. We definitely know that it's not easy to shut your office door and be fully present for your and stop being fully present for your schools in order to participate in this new learning. So we thank you for being here today. And speaking of being fully present, we know it can be very tempting to sign in just to listen in, but we always like to remind our participants that we strive for high engagement during these sessions. Today, you're going to be asked to join breakout rooms, watch videos, grapple with our instructional walkthrough tool for mathematics, and share your reflections. So please, whenever possible, have your cameras on and be ready to participate in that discussion. Of course, things come up in schools, so we absolutely understand if you need to step away, turn your camera off, definitely understand, but as much as you can, try to have those cameras on and be present today. In addition to being present, we have a few additional values and shared norms that we'd like to embrace today. As you scan through the values, I'd love for you to take a moment to, I'd love to take a moment to highlight teaching practice, not perfection today. We're going to spend the bulk of the session grappling and honing our vision for strong instruction in math. And there may be some dissonance, so I encourage you to embrace that experience and be open to others' thoughts. And finally, if you have a private question that comes up throughout the session, please send a private chat to Katie Buckland at TNTP, and she can answer any questions that arise. So with that, here are our objectives for today. I would love if, Brittany, can you read our objectives for today?
Yes, I can. So at first, we're going to reflect on our vision for excellent instruction in mathematics and its connection to learning acceleration. Then we're going to explore and practice with the classroom observation tool in mathematics to refine your vision for strong instruction. And then last, believe it or not, there's a lot of stuff we're doing. Last, then we're going to consider how we can leverage your vision and the tool, the walkthrough tool, to help build capacity and accelerate learning in our math classrooms.
I would love for you, yeah, so much today. So I'd love for you to take a moment in the chat to type in which objective you're most excited about or curious about, either objective 1, 2, or 3. Take a look in the chat. Great, thanks for starting us off. Wonderful. So seeing a lot of 2s and 3s, which is fantastic. I know that as a school leader, I always wanted to get into the action and get into the action planning and making everything come to light in practice. But it's very important to start at the beginning with vision. And we know that working with a classroom observation tool can feel very granular. And in fact, that's by design today. We are going to review a tool and practice using it as a means to refine our vision for strong instruction in math. We are going to reflect on what tools we have already within our own schools that might mirror this tool, and think about how the two supplement or better each other. And finally, we are going to think about how we can use the skills and concepts within this PD today and build capacity within our schools. I also want to name that this session is going to feel very similar to February's session on strong instruction and literacy, if you also attended that one. If you wouldn't mind just giving me a quick show of hands for who attended the February session. Seeing Terry, Donna, okay, so a few of you. Great. So if you did attend that session, some of it is going to feel similar. The objectives and discussion around the transferable best practices elevated from the opportunity myth are largely the same. The difference today is that we're shifting our focus from ELA to math. And there are elements of your vision that may be transferable across contents, but there are certainly nuances in our specific content vision. So we'll be focusing on those nuances today as well. So with that, we are going to dive in. It's first important, like I mentioned, to reflect on a vision for strong instruction. We'll revisit this Jamboard that we're about to do at the end of our session to see if or how your vision evolved as you grapple with the research and instructional tool. So before we start in, I want to take a few minutes to reflect on our current vision. Think about walking into a classroom that exemplifies strong instruction in your mind. Think about teacher inputs and student outputs. What is the teacher doing? What is the teacher saying? What are you seeing from students? What are you hearing from students? And we're going to take about 4 minutes to formulate these ideas on a Jamboard. Make note as you shift through this of any additions from your colleagues that align to your vision, and reflect on any additions that you didn't think about or ones that might surprise you. The link to your Jamboard is in your note catcher for today. That should be in the chat. Katie put a link to the Jamboard and also a direct link she put a link to your note catcher and a direct link to the Jamboard in the chat. So we're going to take 4 minutes to get started. Great, so I'm seeing some great things already coming in. I'm also seeing some trends already surfacing.
See a lot of engagement of students.
Good. So there's a lot there. I'd love for you to now shift to using the pen tool on the left-hand side to just check off the ones that resonate with you. Good. Thanks for starting us off. Great. Okay, wonderful. I'd love to invite us back to the larger group. And I would, if somebody would like to come off mute and share, what is a trend that you're seeing in the Jamboard?
I see a lot of engagement and asking questions and academic talk.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot around facilitation. So the teacher acting as the facilitator and students doing the talking in the math classroom. Would anyone else like to add on?
Teacher asking thought-provoking questions, not necessarily what's the answer, but how did you get to that point? The process being as important as the actual answer.
Yes, so important. Those questions like what, how do you know, and why? So students are actually explaining the concept, their conceptual understanding, not just the answer or the procedure. Absolutely. So we are going to come back to this Jamboard at the end of the session today. Like I said, it's important to first reflect on our vision. And when we revisit it, we'll think about, based on watching the videos, grappling with the tool, has your vision shifted at all? Or is there anything that you're really honing into as you go back to your schools to put some of this into practice, hopefully? Okay. In it to think about how the work we are doing today, which is refining our vision for strong instruction in math, connects to learning acceleration. So I'd like to invite you to type into the chat where you see this connection. How does refining our vision for strong instruction in math connect to learning acceleration? Drop your thoughts into the chat. How does refining our vision for strong math instruction connect to learning acceleration? Yes. Be grounded in best practices. Great. Your vision helps educators find direction. Yes. Common goals. Yes, I'm seeing some great ideas come through. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts. Absolutely. So the core idea here is that strong instruction that allows access to student-centered, grade-appropriate learning is the pathway to learning acceleration. Oftentimes there's a misconception that learning acceleration involves dramatically different inputs or that there exists some silver bullet. But the path to learning acceleration as an outcome depends on great teaching. It seems simple enough, but as you know, great teaching is a very broad idea. So today is about both refining our vision for strong instruction, but also to think about how we can build capacity in teachers to ensure learning acceleration is an outcome. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Brittany to bring us through our next objective.
Thanks, Rhiannon. So now that we've spent some time reflecting on our vision, we're now going to begin exploring and practicing with TNTP's classroom observation tool, which is really exciting. We're going to use this tool today to build context and help also refine our visions for math and to help build our own capacity to identify gaps in instruction and then to identify next steps to push instruction forward in your schools. I also, though, want to first acknowledge that you and your school or your district may already have strong instructional observation tools that you already use. And some aspects of our tool today may start you to think about how you are going to either further utilize your own or revise your own, so to help support your vision. However, the goal today is not for you to hone your instructional lens to a shared experience and to not drop what you have to adopt to do something new. All right, we don't want you to say, okay, goodbye, what we've been using for the past couple of years, this is what we're going to use now. That's not our goal. It's to just see in math classes through a different lens to help employ and help refine your instructional vision that you have, and to make sure that the great work that you're already doing in your districts is continuing. And so to help us frame the use of this tool, let's review some of the research first on where TNTP came up with it and how we got there. So again, like Rhiannon shared, if you were in a literacy session last month, this may seem really familiar with you and you already know about the opportunity myth. If you haven't, buckle up because TNTP did some research on a number of different schools across the United States to hypothesize the learning experience for students and what they're currently experiencing. So, and how we're going to utilize this learning to help you better understand the tool and where it came from. Can I have someone please read this slide, this quote? Let's go with Margaret, please. Yeah, Margaret Bruce.
It's the false promise that if students do what they're asked in school, they'll be set up for success. When students don't get what they need out of school, the problem isn't usually that they tried and failed to do the work that would have prepared them for their goals. It's that they were never given a real chance to try.
Thank you. Yeah, so a lot of times the clients will ask me, why is it called the opportunity myth, right? We ask students every single day, and I know y'all ask your students every single day to aim high. And as we see, they do. We ask them to come to school every day, to do the work we assign, work diligently in school and at home, all with the promise that if they do those things, they will graduate high school ready for college or a career, right? That's what we promised them, right? We promise that all students will have the opportunity to succeed. And unfortunately, and some of y'all may know, that promise is a myth. That promise doesn't always come true for our students. An opportunity in our school systems, in spite of often heroic efforts by millions of educators like yourselves every single day, put in the work to make sure that our students are getting exactly what they deserve. But we know that it's also a scarce resource, and it's not distributed equitably to students across our country. And indeed, our students are holding up their end of the bargain. For the most part, students are working hard, they're doing the things that we ask them to do, but in most cases, they're not getting the chances to truly succeed. So TNTP, what we did, we walked through 2,700 classrooms around the country and found that 2 and 3 of the classroom assignments, so the work that's put in front of kids, were not rigorous enough to prepare students for college, and that 3 and 4 teachers weren't yet adapting the way that they taught, to meet high academic standards. So they were essentially not putting hard work in front of kids, and they were also not pushing kids to do the thinking, right? And so we began to wonder then how our students are experiencing this gap. And so we decided to ask them. So what did we see? We saw that we hypothesized TNTP and found that these 4 things highlighted right there on this slide influence the outcomes that students achieve in the school year. And these 4 resources are consistent access to grade appropriate assignments. So it's the work in front of kids on grade level. 2, strong instruction, where students do most of the thinking. Is the teacher just talking, like I'm doing right now, sorry? Or are the students being asked to do a bulk of the thinking and the talking and the engagement of the text? Are students, number 3, deeply engaged in what they're learning? Do they want to learn what's put in front of them by teachers? And then 4, are teachers who are holding high expectations. We found that teachers who hold high expectations for students believe that their students can complete grade level assignments, and so they put that grade level work in front of students. So unfortunately, though, most students aren't getting regular access to these 4 things, and most of them aren't even getting access to one of these 4 resources, and that is especially true for children of color, those from low-income backgrounds, multilingual learners, and also students with IEP. So students who started the year behind, and this is especially true for students who are behind grade level or instructional grade level. So in our sample of where all those 2,700 classrooms, we saw that students who started the year performing substantially below grade level with access to these 4 things made this amount of growth. So students that had grade appropriate work in front of them, they grew 7.3 months. Students who had strong instruction executed by their teachers grew 6.1 months. Students who were asked to do work that would cause them or ask them to be deeply engaged grew 0.9 months. And then students who had teachers in front of them that consistently messaged their deep belief and put work in front of students that was on grade level grew 7.9 months, which is crazy, y'all. So the impact of teachers and the impact of grade appropriate assignments is substantial that we found in our study. There is an implicit narrative, though, that is sometimes told about students who are behind, is that they can't do grade level work. And we found that that's just not the case. So like I said, we can see learning acceleration embodied through the 4 resources here, and particularly through grade level assignments and strong instruction. Our PD today and our time together today is driven by these 2 key focal points and how we're going to be leveraging grade appropriate assignments and strong instructional moves to create deep engagement and high expectations in our math classrooms. The opportunity myth, though, I just want to preface, is not focused solely on one content, right? It's focused across and can be applied across content areas. And these 4 key resources are transferable. So let's define what grade appropriate math assignments and strong instruction look like in particular.
Thank you, Brittany. So I'm going to talk through what it does look like in math. So excellent math instruction is focused, coherent, and pursues a balanced approach in attending the 3 aspects of rigor in the standards. So when we think about focus, we're thinking about the Massachusetts standards and how they significantly narrow the way time and energy is spent in the math classroom and focus deeply on the major work of each grade. When we're thinking about coherence, we want to think about how the standards connect across grades so that students can build on new understanding onto foundations built in previous years and link to major topics within grades. And when we think about rigor, this guides teachers to pursue a balance of conceptual understanding, procedural skill and fluency, and application. So now we're going to dive into what each of these components looks like in practice. So the standards specify a focus on certain numbers, number types, and representations at each grade. So for example, let's take a look at OA1 and OA2 for kindergarten and first grade. Look at the differences in the standards here and type into the chat, what do you notice about the number types and representations in these standards across the grades? So specifically, what are you seeing as the differences between the kindergarten focus and the first grade focus? Good, thanks for starting us off, Terry. Using equations to represent word problems in first. From K to 1, use more application. Yes. Yes. Think about the numbers specifically. What do you notice with numbers? Yeah, good. Christina just put it in. Kindergarten is within 10, first grade's within 20. Yes, and David, exactly. There's a gradual increase of complexity, and that's by design. The standards help us focus on numbers, number types, and representations that are appropriate for each grade level. For example, like many of you said in the chat, in K, we're working within 10 when approaching word problems. In first, we're working within 20, and then first graders even start to solve problems that might involve 3 add-ins. In first, there also may be unknowns in all positions, so the focus must be on different types of word problems. So you can see that increase in complexity that happens across the standards. So for this shift to come to life in practice, when we're thinking about coherence, teachers need to be thinking about the development of mathematical concepts within and across the grades and making connections explicit for students. So the authors of the standards have done the hard work of articulating clear and carefully laid progressions of learning, but instruction needs to explicitly relate new concepts to previous concepts to help students make sense of math. Year to year, unit to unit, and day to day. And then finally, the last piece is rigor. So the 3 aspects of rigor work together to create deep, authentic command of mathematical concepts. Students develop conceptual understanding of math concepts so that they are able to see math as more than just a set of mnemonics or discrete procedures. And I can't emphasize this enough because I think that many of us probably see classrooms where we're still teaching students algorithms or procedures for solving problems, but the shift really needs to move towards helping students understand the why behind the math and why the algorithms and why these steps work. So having that discussion and pushing that conceptual understanding. Students develop procedural skill and fluency so that they are able to calculate with speed and accuracy. And students develop their application skills so that they can choose the appropriate concepts and procedures when they tackle tough mathematical challenges in the real world. All 3 aspects of rigor, conceptual understanding, procedural skill and fluency, and application need to be addressed for students to be able to reach the depth of learning that is expected by the standards. The 3 aspects are presented in this order for a reason. Conceptual understanding needs to underpin everything else. Students need to understand why. They need to understand how the math works. Fluency can be practiced in the context of applications, and applications can build conceptual understanding as well. These 3 components are often considered the 3 legs of a stool. Each is equally critical to establishing stability in mathematical understanding. So the core idea here is that excellent math instruction is focused, coherent, and attends to all 3 aspects of rigor named in the standards. This is an important idea because focused, coherent, and rigorous instruction is what ensures grade appropriateness. So when we ask, is a lesson truly grade appropriate and on grade level, these are the 3 things that we have to think about. To accelerate learning, math instruction must be grade appropriate. As we now shift into exploring TNTP's math observation tool, you'll notice that this idea underpins the content section of the tool. So we first must determine if instruction reflects the focus, coherence, and rigor required by the standards before we can examine other elements of instruction or student outputs. So before diving into the observation tool, which we're getting to in a couple minutes, I promise, we first wanted to highlight the components of strong math instruction to better form our vision. In the tool, you'll see focus, coherence, and rigor underpin high quality mathematical content. We first have to ask ourselves whether a lesson attends to these 3 elements before thinking about other instructional practices. You'll also see that it's organized into 2 main categories. At the top, you'll see culture of learning. As we explored in the opportunity myth discussion, student engagement is critical to student success, which is measured through culture of learning. Next, you'll see the mathematics instruction section, specifically the content students are learning, the instructional practices that the teacher is utilizing, and the extent to which students are owning the thinking in the classroom. So what we'll do now is start to take a look at the tool. In your note catcher for today, you have a link to the math instructional walkthrough tool that we used in the opportunity myth, and it's the same one that we'll grapple with today. We'll also put the link in the chat for you. For those of you who attended the last section, you'll probably notice right off the bat the similarities between this tool and the ELA tool. For example, they are both hierarchical and they begin with culture of learning. They both emphasize the instructional shifts and they both close with student ownership. So those are those transferable best practices, but you'll see the nuances in the bullets underneath. Take 5 minutes now to read through the content section of this tool. Take notes and write down questions or anything that jumps out to you. We're going to reflect back. We're going to reflect on this tool in groups and also think about what you put into the Jamboard, what aligns to what you expressed in the Jamboard, and what is maybe different or surprising to you. So the questions you'll be thinking about are on the screen as well. We'll take about 5 minutes here to look through the tool. Take about 1 more minute to read through. Okay, we're now going to take a few minutes to discuss our thoughts with our colleagues in breakout rooms. So again, the questions are on the slide, and we will also make sure to put these questions into the chat for you. Think about the Jamboard from the opening session. What elements of this tool align or do not align to your initial vision? Is anything that stands out? Is there anything that stands out as surprising or exciting? And what questions do you have about the tool? we'll spend about 4 minutes in breakout rooms. Instruction. Great.
All right,
So-
so now that we
Yeah.
now that we looked at the tool, which is awesome, and I loved hearing all of your reflections, now we're actually going to put it into practice. We're going to watch a video. Woo, I love math, right? I love seeing teachers in action. I got to see New Bedford in action yesterday and the day before, and then I got to see today Everett School District in action. So got a video for y'all, so it's not as good as in person, but what we got. So this is a 6th grade classroom that we're going to watch today, and the lesson is focused on dividing fractions. As you all know, that's super tricky, so we're going to see students grapple with this and have some great math conversations. As we watch, I'm going to invite you to do a few things. I would love for you to write down what you notice about the culture of learning aligned to the indicators, those little bullet points. I want you to identify what standards you think students are working on. Okay, I'll get out your Common Core app, please, if you don't have it on the top of your mind. Write down the questions that students were asked. So what does the teacher ask of students to do? And then consider what the teacher and students are saying. Who is answering the questions and who is doing the thinking within this lesson? You can take notes however you like, piece of paper, Word document, Google Doc, whatever feels best for you. And we are going to watch for about 11 minutes. All right? Okay, great. Started.
Bear with me for 1 second as I get up, switch screens here.
The hotel Wi-Fi, y'all.
Yeah.
So today we're going to actually start learning Target 5 using our understandings of multiplication and division to divide fractions by fractions.
So today the lesson was about having students tap into what they already know about multiplying and dividing whole numbers and multiplying fractions to begin to learn how to divide with fractions.
What was the big idea that we learned when we multiply fractions? What happens to the product when we multiply fractions?
I was gonna say that it cuts in half most of the time.
So let's look back here up at this big idea. Multiplying by a fraction less than 1. Is 1/2 less than 1? Yes. Yeah. And when we get 8 times a half, what do we get? 4. Is the product less than one of the factors? Yes. And then what happens when we take, which is kind of similar to what you were talking about, this halving idea. It's halves one of the factors. When we multiply a third times a fourth, what do we get? 12. Is the product less than both factors? Yes. So I want you to keep that in mind today as we start dividing fractions. And instead of using the language of factor and product, we're going to be looking at the language of dividend, divisor, and quotient. So today I want you to be thinking, what happens to the quotient when we divide by fractions?
When you look at the standards and how they're written, the division standard is actually quite complex. It's not just a simple students learn how to use the algorithm to divide fractions, which is what we might see in some of the former state standards that are out there. But if you actually look at it and think about it, students need to understand and interpret the quotient very clearly, that it is larger than the dividend and the divisor.
I want you to silently think to yourself and solve to yourself this problem. And even if you're not sure, that's okay, because that's what we're going to do today. We're going to figure out how to solve problems like this. All right, go ahead and turn to your partner. What do you think the answer is to 3 divided by 1/2?
1.5. It's 1.5 because a half of 3, a half of 2 equals a half, and then a half. Well, no. A half of 2 is 1, and a half of 1 is 1/2.
Yeah, so if you add those two, you get one and a half, which is half of 3.
Yeah.
What were some of the answers that we had? What were some of the answers? Alondra? So one of our possible solutions is 1 1/2. Marlene? 6. Any others out there? Jesus?
I got 1 1/2.
Great. That one's already up here. Any others? All right, so we have 2 answers. These answers are quite different from one another. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try to make sense of this. Is there somebody who'd be willing to share their thinking about how they got 1 1/2 or how they got 6?
I divided 3 divided by 1/2, and I knew that half of 3 was 1 whole and 1/2.
Okay, so you thought of 1/2 of 3 is 1 1/2?
Yeah.
Okay, and let's hear from another.
I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think it's 1 1/2 because 3 times 1/2 equals 1 1/2, and we're dividing.
Interesting. So let me get a different color here. So you are saying that 3 times 1/2 equals 1 1/2. Okay. Turn and talk to your partner. What do you think about this statement? Is this true?
We're dividing and not multiplying.
3 times 1/2 is true because 1/2 3 times is 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1 plus 1/2 equals 1 1/2.
I did the division algorithm for the problem, and I ended up getting 2. So I'm actually agreeing with Annabelle that it might not be 1 1/2.
Okay, so you're not sure this is the correct solution, but you're also not sure what it might be. And it sounds like you've learned some sort of a procedure for dividing fractions,
Yes,
but you're not sure. You're confident with it or not sure?
I'm confident.
You're confident. Okay, so you think the answer is 2? Okay.
I remember that division means groups of. So they're trying to find how many halves are in 3, and that's 6.
So I'm looking 3 into groups of 1/2, okay? Or I could say 3 into 1/2 parts. And you're saying that's 6.
Yeah, because there's 2 halves. 2 halves. So in 3 there's 6.
Because the people that are saying it would be 1 1/2, that would be multiplication, but we're talking about division.
So you're saying that a multiplication problem and a division problem can't have the same answer?
Because, well, sometimes they can, but like in this case, because it's saying that 3 times 1/2 does equal 1 1/2, but I don't think that 3 divided by 1/2 equals 1 1/2.
The best part of the lesson today was listening to the students think about making sense of this problem, 3 divided by 1/2, and being so convinced that it was 1 1/2, which was incorrect, and trying so hard to come up with evidence for why they felt so strongly that 1 1/2 was the solution. There was the great moment when a few kids said, well, I know it's not 1 1/2 because if you multiply 1 1/2 times 1/2, you don't get 3, and multiplication is a check of division. So I loved hearing that. What I want to do right now is talk about what mathematicians do when they are trying to make sense of a problem. We're trying to make sense of 3 divided by 1/2, and we have 2 ideas. Most of us are saying 1 1/2. Some of us are saying it's not 1 1/2, but I'm not sure what it is. And then we've got some of you that are saying it's 6. So is this our problem? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to take out our fraction kit pieces. So we're going to try to make sense of this problem by, let's model. So if we were to do 3 into groups of 1/2, by looking at this model, I want you to look at this model and talk to your partner. 3 into groups of 1/2. How does this model help support your idea or change your idea?
What the model that you put supports my answer because 6 is also the answer, but it's because it's like how many B's go into A, and
hang on. How many B's go into A? What division statement is that?
Number 2, how many B's go into A? Okay, so keep talking.
So I just put like how many halves go into 3, and I got 6. I would like to agree with my answer, which is 1 1/2, because if you we're dividing 3 into like its half, so it would be 1 1/2 if you cut that in half.
Okay, so is this problem 3 divided by 2? You're saying this is what we're doing?
Sort of.
Sort of. So you're saying that these two would have the same answer? Yesterday, we agreed that all 10 of these statements were true, that you could model a division statement by thinking of the dividend as A, the divisor as B, and you could ask yourself how many B's, how many divisors go into A. So if we use what Clinton said, this would be our B, and this would be our A. How many B's go into A? Does this make sense? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Yes. Makes sense.
So that whole moment of dissonance and disequilibrium around 3 divided by 1/2, which took 10, 15 minutes, was so great in hearing so many kids share their thinking and try to prove their idea and their answer with evidence.
So I was thinking about what's long that we could divide? And then I was thinking, well, candy, it's Halloween's coming up. So I was envisioning licorice, although would you believe it, licorice is the only candy that I actually don't like. But it works for this model. Imagine we have a long rope of licorice. It's 2 feet long. And I want to divide, Ismail and Brian, I want to divide this rope of licorice into 1/6 of a foot pieces. So my question for you is, how many pieces of licorice will I have if I divide it into 1/6 pieces? And to do this, I'm going to give you a fraction kit for you and your partner to see if you can make sense of this problem with a model.
And what I love about the Common Core in math, particularly the mathematical practices, and so for me, I feel like they have unleashed this new excitement around teaching when I'm really starting to think about not just students mastering skills, but mastering ways of thinking and thinking about how do I measure kids' ability to use models and make sense and critique the reasoning of others. So I feel like for me, it's expanded all the possibilities of what I can do with my lesson planning, and just it's challenging.
So I checked in with most all of the tables except for this table, so I'm going to actually go to this table. How many pieces of licorice did you guys decide I would have? Angie?
12.
12. And how did you figure that out?
Because like there's 6 on this side, and then you cut, and we put 3 on 1/3 instead of the 6, and then it also equals 6, and 6 plus 6 equals 12.
Ah, okay. I want you to now go back to our problem, and I want you to put 3 pieces of licorice. Now your rope.
Okay, that was great, wasn't it? I love watching videos of math and seeing math in action in person. So now we're going to take 1 minute, gather all your notes, take out the math tool, okay, and start to think on how you would rate each section, all right? Give us 1 minute, and then we're going to go into breakout groups and talk about it with our colleagues. All right, go. For about 15 more seconds. All right, that may not have been enough time for you to get your full ratings down. It's okay. You're about to talk about it with your colleagues. So for timing purposes, I encourage y'all to jump right into the conversation, like start it off immediately, culture of learning, because we'll only have about 4 minutes to have this breakout group discussion. If you finish discussing the ratings and you feel confident and you have time to spare, I recommend that then you start to discuss whether or not how you may want to use this tool or a video like this in your schools or in your districts. All right, so we're going to go into breakout groups. We'll see you shortly. Thank you.
Is being recorded.
Okay, wow, that was fast. I don't know about y'all breakout groups, but we were in it, a discussion, and okay, so now we're going to dive into, and thank you for engaging with that. The group that I was in had a really good discussion, a robust discussion. And Norma, shout out to you for holding that bar high for your school district and for your teachers. Thank you for lifting that up for us. So now I would love for us to launch into a poll. Now that you have a chance to discuss with your colleagues a little bit, I'd love to get a sense of where we are. Note that this is anonymous, so no pressure if you're like, I really can't decide where we're falling. No pressure at all, okay? Just give me your general gut sense of where this teacher was falling. And we encourage you also to lean into any discomfort that you might be experiencing. You know, maybe you don't know exactly the standard that was being taught in this lesson. That's okay. And this is a safe space, so it's totally fine for you to have those feelings and to know that we're all, on a journey of learning math better, right? All right, so answers are coming in. Okay. Looks like we're kind of normed for 1. Okay. 2, also normed on the second indicator, high quality mathematical content. Let me see, 3. We're kind of split there. All right, 4. Some of us have gotten to there to 4 still. Okay. And keep this up for another about 30 seconds. Okay. If you haven't gotten your answers in, feel free to go ahead and do that. Gotten about 26, 28 people have answered that one. Yep, 28, 29 people now. Thank you for putting in your answers. Take another 15 seconds. If you haven't put in those answers yet, no pressure, but go ahead and put them in. 29 people, 30 people now. That last person. Another 5 seconds. 1, yes. All right. 32. All right, y'all. I'm going to end this poll. Overall, we are looking like we're kind of normed, which is great. So we're going to go into the indicators one by one together, and feel free to come off mute and to share some of your responses or some of your answers. So for our first one, culture of learning. Culture of learning. So similar to a lot of y'all said, about more than like 80% of y'all said that the answer was a yes. Multiple students provided responses. All students appeared to be engaged. And I know it was a video, you can only see so much, but from what we saw, the students were engaged in with the teacher, the group work portion of the lesson. Time was used effectively. And of course, again, it was a video, so we saw snips, many students demonstrated enthusiasm for the division discussion they were having throughout the lesson. Just a little additional context about this section. In classrooms, we start by first looking at whether there's a culture of learning in the room, which we mean by that is, are students doing what is being asked of them? So we look at this first because if kids are not generally on task and focused on the work of the lesson, then you may need to address, of course, classroom culture and classroom management strategies before, or also during at the same time, addressing the quality of content or thinking about what's actually happening in the classroom. For our next indicator, look at that fancy transition. Our next indicator is high quality mathematical content, which is, does the enacted lesson reflect the focus, coherence, rigor required by college and career ready standards for mathematics? That overall answer was a yes. And that was, again, normed across the group with our poll. We'll start first with focus. And for focus, you're going to ask yourselves, does the enacted lesson focus on a grade level cluster, a grade level standard, or part thereof? If you know the standard that this lesson was assessing, go ahead and feel free to type it in the chat. Let's see my mathematical people. Let's see, anyone know the standard before we reveal it? Okay. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, thank you, Kate. All right, let me just, yep, okay. Yeah, so our sorry, hold on, just give me 1 second. I'm just so impressed we all got this. So the first indicator we ask ourselves, does this lesson focus on grade level cluster? And yes, it does. It lesson focus on 6 and SA1, which asks students to interpret and compute quotients of fractions and solve word problems, I almost said world, word problems involving division of fractions by fractions, or the example given is by using visual fraction models and equations to represent the problem. So this lesson is focused on a grade level cluster and standard, which is great. The next thing we ask ourselves then is whether or not, is coherence next? Does this lesson appropriately connect mathematical concepts written and or across grades are as appropriate, reflecting the coherence in the standard? And one helpful tool is this DESI Standards Navigator, which is also linked in your additional resources in your note catcher. This, can help you identify the related standards from prior grades and then related standards within the grade. And so to be clear here, she did that. She started off the lesson by talking about what students already know about multiplying, and she referenced that multiple times throughout her anecdotes and her debrief of her class. And students were bringing prior knowledge to bear unprompted by the teacher. Students were referencing the anchor charts that she didn't necessarily say, let's look at this anchor chart, right? And then the last aspect of this indicator is determine rigor. So does this lesson intentionally target the aspect of rigor, conceptual understanding, procedural skill, and fluency and application called for by the standards being addressed? And so when you look at that standard, what aspect of rigor it does call for? Conceptual understanding, procedural, or fluency or application? Go ahead and put your answer in the chat. What does this fall under? Conceptual understanding, procedural skill and fluency, or application? Okay, Kate Lally with the math. Conceptual, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Julie. Okay. Okay, so this frame conceptual understanding. Okay, yeah. Thank you all so much. And then, so the next thing we want to also indicate whether or not, how do we figure that out, right? That's the tricky part, right? There is a great resource for this because the answer is actually all three. It was a trick question. This specific standard addresses all three aspects of rigor. And a great resource is louisianabelieves.com, which really just shows you, if you look up the standard, where it falls under for each aspect of rigor, which is great. It takes the guesswork out of it already. And when we look at this lesson, we see that this lesson is firmly grounded in building a conceptual understanding of dividing fractions by fractions as the teacher engages students in a discussion of what this mathematical act really means, right? So students were also engaging in some light application of using the skill in a real world context. They were dividing that piece of licorice, which made me feel a little hungry. The lesson, though, is not focused on procedural skill and fluency, which is appropriate given the language and focus of the standard, but particularly where they are in the sequence of the learning. And like I said, a helpful resource for this is Louisiana Believes, which Katie put in the chat. So feel free to open that, bookmark it, because it's a great way to determine whether or not something is whether or not a standard is rigorous. It's not an official tool though, so I will say this, it's kind of an unofficial tool because it wasn't put out by Common Core State Standards, but in our opinion through TNTP and all of our mathematical eyes that we have on our team, it is a helpful resource, okay? So now we need to ask ourselves, and so if you're like, I don't really truly want to use Louisiana Believes, it gives me the answer right away. Brittany, I'd rather really dive into whether or not and understand the different aspects of conceptual understanding, procedural skill, and fluency and application. There are, of course, also ways to investigate and look at the words of the standards to determine where it falls under each of these aspects of rigor. Here are a list of words that typically indicate each aspect. Take a few moments to look at it. And don't worry, we're also sending you this PowerPoint, so you'll have this also as a resource. Okay, so now that we're clear on whether the content is grade appropriate and high quality, we turn now to the instructional practices. Our rating for this overall was a yes. And the way we got it is that we went through each of the indicator, each of one of those little bullet points, and noted whether we saw evidence of it. So let's talk through the first bullet a little bit more. Okay, now I think we're all norms there. Actually, when we did our poll, y'all were like, yes for this one. Okay, so I'm gonna talk through, this section of the observation tool when you're digging into it is particularly important because math instruction is often focused on teaching students how to get the answer instead of employing instructional practices that make the actual mathematics explicit for students. For example, you might notice that butterfly picture on the left-hand side, right? I've definitely used that as a former student. And this is a method that's often taught to students to help them add fractions. This does indeed help students get the right answer, but it does not help the students understand the math behind the fraction addition. Now, if you look, so for example, when they're presented with more advanced concepts and problems like the one on the right, they're gonna struggle, right? If you only teach them how to do it on the left, they look at the one on the right and they're like, how do I do this? So the college and career ready standards call for students to develop a deep, authentic command of mathematical concepts. And to do that, teachers need to employ instructional practices that make those mathematical concepts and ideas really explicit. So here's a few other ways to make math explicit. We can use multiple explanations, representations, and/or examples. We can have students share a variety of students' representation and solution methods. And we can also summarize the mathematics to reinforce the focus of the lesson. For example, if I ask a student to represent 3/4, one student might do so with fraction tiles, another might do so with a picture, and another student might do so with a number line. The reason we want to strategically share multiple representations for students and solution methods is to support students with becoming flexible mathematicians. There are multiple ways to solve and represent problems. So back to the section of the tool. Okay, now we're back to the tool, y'all. When we go through each of the indicators, we notice that the answers to each one of these are yes. And for the sake of time, I won't talk through each indicator, but if you want to, like I shared, we'll be emailing this PowerPoint to y'all so you can read each one of the descriptions, okay? Again, same thing with the other one. We'll go ahead and feel free to access this. So now let's dive into student ownership. So for student ownership, the overall rating was a mostly. And let's debrief briefly on how we got there, okay? So the first two are yeses. Students were doing the majority of the work. Yeah, we all saw that. Students used reasoning problem-solving skills. Yeah, we saw that too. The third indicator there is we're falling at a mostly because the teacher introduces the fraction kit pieces and rather than asking rather than asking students which tool may help you solve this problem. And someone in my breakout group actually named that, so shout out to y'all, I think it was Donna. But you quickly then give control back by asking them to explain how the tool helps them better understand the problem. So to get a 4 here or a yes, students would actually need to choose the tools strategically on their own, okay? So that's where that difference is. And then the other two indicators, a couple of indicators were also rated as a mostly. For the first one, it's a mostly because the teacher asked a few students who shared aloud in front of their whole group to explain how they got their answer. And then some students also explained their thinking when talking to their partners, but they were not always explicitly directed to do so. So we're looking for that explicit direction to have students elaborate more. And then the other one, the next one underneath that, the teacher asked all students to talk to their partner about one student's thought about 3 divided by 1/2. Could it be 1 and 1/2 because 3 times 1/2 equals 1 and 1/2. We hear a couple of pairs of students responding to one another in response to each other's thinking, but we have limited evidence for this indicator since we didn't hear most of the conversations between partners and we didn't hear any students asking questions about each other's thinking. So that's where we're falling at a mostly there.
Thank you. If you have any questions that come up again, feel free to put them in the chat as we close up that video. And then I do see in the chat that somebody asked if you'll get a link to these videos. And you should, if you go into the slide deck, the link is still there in the notes section of the slide deck, a link to the video, so you'll be able to see it in that notes section. Great, so thank you, Brittany, for walking us through that 6th grade example. Now that we've done one practice with the observation tool, we'd love to dive into another video so we can get another at-bat at honing our vision and using the tool as a guide. So especially with the additional context that we've gained. So we're going to dive into a 3rd grade math classroom, and this lesson is focused on finding perimeter. As you watch, we're going to invite you to think about the same questions that you see on the slide here. We're going to watch for about 6 minutes for this video. And then after, just like before, we'll take a minute to finalize our thoughts and then dive into breakout rooms to discuss what we're thinking. So again, bear with me as I switch my screens here. And
Rhiannon, we can't actually see the video.
Sorry about that. Try one more time. You see it now?
Yes, thank you.
So boys and girls, we've been doing a lot of smart work in math, and today we're going to do some more really good work. You're going to notice up on the board that I have a learning target here, and I'm going to ask if somebody could please read this aloud to me. Jada, would you please read it?
I can apply my understanding of how to find the perimeter of an object in order to solve real-world problems.
Today's objective was to teach the children how to solve for perimeter, really find a purpose in their real life of why they would need to know perimeter, and then throw a little problem solving into it. You know, we didn't want to just keep it as, okay, to solve perimeter, you add up the sides. You know, that's pretty surface level understanding.
So I decided I need a fence around my garden. So I'm going to put up a fence.
Okay, boys and girls, while Mrs. McQuarrie is doing that on the smartboard, on your paper in front of you, draw a fence around your garden. Mrs. McQuarrie is going to buy her fencing this afternoon. I wonder how she'll determine how much fencing she needs to order.
That's
Think about it.
Really good question.
Turn and talk to your partner about how she may determine how much fencing she needs to order when she gets to the store.
I don't want to just give them a bunch of worksheets where you have the sides all given to them and they're just asked to add up and find the perimeter. I want to make sure that they truly understood what perimeter meant. In order to figure out the perimeter, we figure out the distance around the entire outside of my figure. And that's what we call perimeter. And we find that by adding up all of our sides. Can you help me do some adding now? What is 7 plus 7, boys and girls?
14.
14, good. And now I'm going to add my other double, 6 plus 6. And what does that equal? Yell it out.
Wow.
Excellent. And what do you think Mrs. McQuarrie has to do with these two numbers that I got now?
Add those two together.
Yes, and I'm going to add 14 plus 12 together. And what am I going to get, Michael, when I add 14 plus 12?
26.
26. So Mrs. McQuarrie is going to write P for perimeter equals 26 yards.
We're going to now create our own perimeters. We've worked with these 1-inch tiles before when we were dealing with area. Today we're going to use them for perimeter. The tiles we have used when the children were figuring out area, and we figured that was a good way to now introduce perimeter so that we can now follow up with, now you've created a figure with the tiles for area, calculate the perimeter, and we could really make the connection between the two because they're using the same manipulative for it. You're going to work with your partner, and we're going to create a figure on your workboard using these tiles that is exactly 14 inches.
And then as far as the shift, depth of knowledge, when they had to go off into their groups independently and use the tiles, now they were not only asked to just add up all the sides, they were asked to create the perimeter of various objects. And that was a really nice way to see who really truly understood perimeter and who maybe needed some extra support to get where they needed to be.
What are you guys doing right here? Tell me what you got.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Excellent.
So I wanted them to realize there's more than one way to solve that, and that they might not necessarily have the same area. They might not have used the same number of tiles. So it's really just, again, diving into that deeper knowledge, that deeper understanding, letting kids discover on their own.
You guys are counting the tiles. When we're looking for perimeter, what are we counting?
The side.
We're counting the outside. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I also need to count 8, 9. Okay, count that for me. Do it that way and count it for me. Remember, perimeter is the outside, not the inside tiles. Wait, don't move it yet. Let her finish counting. I think that's great. You're already thinking. That's great.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
So what can we do? So, okay, take 2 out. Let's see what happens. Let's try again.
A couple of kids at first wanted to count the tiles, and they were confusing area at first. So it's those questions that you're scaffolding to get them to it, and then they were able to, rectify. A lot of times you get that gap, you get that quiet time, and you want to give them the answer, and you want to spoon feed them, and you want to teach them. But it's really all about discovering.
I think I got it.
Great. So just take a few seconds to look through the tool again, think about where you are feeling that this lesson falls, and then we'll head back into our breakout rooms momentarily. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I apologize if I pulled you from your deep conversations, but we are going to discuss what we thought about this video when we were using the tool. So first, just like before, we'll start with a poll. So now that you had a chance to discuss your ratings, we'd love to kind of see where we all landed. That poll is open. And again, completely anonymous, even if you're not sure, just go with your gut and we'll go through each section. Great. About halfway there. Great. We're generally around the same area, but we're a little bit more split this time. Take about 10 more seconds and then we'll share the results. Okay, let me share these so you can see where we all landed. We are a little bit more split, especially around high quality mathematical content. So we'll dive into that because actually we were pretty split with that one as well. So definitely can see why we're split across the board. And then we're falling in a somewhat for high quality instructional practices and student ownership. So with that, we'll dive into each section. I'm going to go through them a little bit faster without, now that you have context, than the first example. So first with culture of learning, we are falling at a mostly here. Students completed tasks and volunteered responses. They seem to follow behavioral expectations and directions. They executed transitions fairly smoothly. However, even though all students were given the opportunity to provide responses through group work, it doesn't necessarily seem like there is palpable excitement or joy for learning, which is usually what would bump that to a yes. So some students were following expectations, but for that yes, we would definitely want to see more of a culture of discussion and engagement in the learning happening. With the next section, for high quality mathematical content, we ended up at a yes here, but like I said, we were very torn. So this one can kind of go either way. And again, I'll just say the purpose of the tool is to refine our vision. It's not about getting the right answer for every section. The purpose is to look through each bullet as a method to push instruction further. So whether it's a not yet or a yes, we could speak to, but we'll just kind of talk through what we were thinking about. So for focus, this lesson does focus on 3MD8, which is solving real world problems involving perimeters of polygons. Students spend the majority of the lesson finding perimeter of a created polygon and exploring the connection between perimeter and area. Students made different rectangles that shared the same perimeter but different areas. However, there's only one real world example, which is the fence. So the full extent of the standard has not yet been explored. Students will still need to determine unknown side lengths and make the explicit conceptual connection between area and perimeter. But she's starting on that path in focusing on the third grade standard. If we think about coherence, the teacher does make a quick connection back to area, which is 3MDC5. When introducing the manipulative, students will use that day. And for rigor, the standard specifically focuses on procedural skill and fluency and application, but also requires students to make a somewhat of a conceptual connection between area and perimeter. The rigor called for of this standard is focused on procedural skill and fluency and application. So that's why we ended up at a yes there. So overall, I would say we're kind of at 2 out of 3. So that's why it's kind of, it was right on that line between a not yet and a yes, but just to give you some more context about what we were thinking about. Sure, you thought of even more things as you were exploring with your groups as well. For the next section, high quality instructional practices, we were at a somewhat here, which is like most of you. The teacher did make the lesson explicit by using explanations and representations, which is the fence. The teacher did provide students with an opportunity to work with grade level problems, but the teacher did not share a variety of students' representations or solution methods. And the teacher did not seem to check for understanding whole group, but did do some checks for understanding during small group work. And then finally, for student ownership, right, for this one, we were at a not yet. I think many of you were at a somewhat or a not yet. The reason why we are at a not yet is those students work on a task for the majority of the lesson. The focus is on computation over reasoning and problem solving. Teachers ask students to count the sides to find the perimeter, but don't ask students to explain or justify their thinking in any way by explaining their problem solving process. It's just about counting and getting the right answer. When misconceptions arise, students do not own the complex thinking. The teacher explicitly names the error for students and what to do to solve the problem instead of questioning the students to help them get there. So again, more information about our rationale you can see after the session in the slide notes. But that's where we landed, pretty aligned to all of you here. And again, the purpose is about honing our vision, not necessarily getting the same responses in each section, but we are in generally the same area. So with that, after practicing with the tool, we want to pause here and take a step back to reflect on our initial thoughts on what strong instruction in math look like. So I would like to invite you in the Jamboard at the top to switch to the next slide. Katie's going to put the link to the Jamboard back into the chat right now. So switch to the next slide at the top of the Jamboard. And I'd like you to reflect on these two questions. What are you taking away, and how has your vision for strong instruction changed as a result of this session, or what's coming to the forefront of your mind? And then are you thinking about changing any observational practices coming out of this session? So thinking about what you're going to change in practice, especially in building capacity in teachers. So again, the link to the Jamboard is again in the chat. And then at the top there, you'll see a 1 and you can just click the arrow to go to the next slide. We'll take just a couple minutes here. Thank you for starting us off. Love these reflections. Love the idea of actually showing this tool to teachers so that they have bullets and a vision for instruction. Using the videos to practice alignment with the tool is a great next step. Wonderful. We'll take about 1 more minute here. If you've already shared, feel free to use that pen tool to show resonance. Great. Yeah, I love that blue post-it that somebody just resonated with, that student ownership requires students to justify their answers. That's a really small kind of bite-sized thing to be thinking about, and it would be a great thing to kind of prioritize in instruction. Yes, thank you. Whoever just put that pink post-it in, can't emphasize enough the importance of bite-sized goals and next steps. So somebody said they're going to focus on just 1 or 2 areas to start rather than do all 4. That's a great idea. And again, we encourage you to start at the top and kind of go down because they build on each other. You can't have student ownership if the task and the focus of the math is not actually grade appropriate. Wonderful. Okay. do the screen switch again. All right. Thank you for engaging in that. Appreciate the reflections. So now as we dive into the last part of our session today, we're going to think about, we're going to synthesize. We're going to take what we learned about great instruction in math and a tool to support that and think, how can we leverage this in our schools and math classrooms? So now we're going to move into some work time. And if you've been in one of our sessions before, this should look familiar, where we're going to spend some time thinking about how to support teachers in strengthening their math instruction. So think about that initial vision from this beginning of the session and any modifications you've considered. Also consider how your vision and this tool could build capacity in teachers. And how can you pull these levers to support teachers in refining their own vision and craft and ultimately make some lasting change? So to do that, we'll ask you to consider the 4 leader levers that leaders have at their disposal to ensure they can systematize change. Expectations. What are the precise expectations of adults? What will you communicate to teachers? Tools. What tools will adults need to meet these expectations? Supports. What support or development do adults need to implement the system? And then opportunities, which is time. What time will adults need to learn and refine implementation? So what we would like to invite everyone to do now is to kind of take some time to reflect on these 4 levers and think about this essential question: what needs to happen to support teachers in strengthening their math instruction to accelerate student learning? So first, take some individual time to reflect. And then in a few minutes, we will actually open breakout rooms so that you can discuss ideas with colleagues across the states, and you'll be able to select your breakout room to go into either expectations, tools, support, or time, whatever you would like to discuss. But for now, we'd love for you to just do some time, so to have some individual reflection time for about 3 minutes, thinking about which one of these levers might be most challenging for you as you think about how to bring these learnings today into your schools. So 3 minutes of individual reflection time. In the meantime, we're also going to put our feedback form into the chat for today, just in case anybody does need to drop off early. We'd love to get your feedback. So we'll put that in the chat for you as you take some individual reflection time, and then we'll open up breakout rooms. Great. And so we're now going to open up the breakout rooms. Again, you can select your own breakout room for this section. So whichever one you would like to get some feedback on or would like to hear your colleagues' thoughts about, that's the breakout room you should choose. So expectations, tools, support, or time. They should be open, so you are welcome to join rooms now.
Feel free to type in the chat also if you need support being assigned to a room. So if you know which room you'd like to go in, you feel free to type it in the chat. All right, if you're still here, do you need support on getting into a breakout group? I can definitely assign you. Donna, do you need help?
No, sorry, I was just filling out the survey. I guess I could have logged off the call before I went to do the survey. Sorry about that.
That's okay, I get it.
My big concern, I guess my big question, I don't know which group this would be for, is the math content piece is fine. It's more of the classroom culture. Teaching new teachers how to do that is, you know, you can be the smartest math person, but if you don't have the classroom culture, it doesn't matter. And that's where we're struggling a lot this year. And I think part of it is just the whole post-pandemic world anyhow, that students kind of need to be retaught how to even do school, never mind how to do math. So that's the biggest challenge we're kind of finding. That's a long answer to a question.
I wonder, no, I wonder if that then falls under either between like support or expectations, right? Expectations for your teachers, you know, are they fully aware of what rigorous, strong instruction looks like at your schools or at your district? Do they have a clear vision of that based off of what you've already communicated? Does that resonate?
I think they know what, they don't know how. But yeah, but I'll go to that group though and see if I can get some thoughts or input from other people. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Angela or Maureen, do you either need help with getting into a breakout group? Maureen? Potentially? Anything? There's so many people in support. I'm gonna go into there.
Brittany, one quick note, actually, let me pause.
All right. Coming back. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. So good to see you all. Give just a few more seconds. Sometimes the lag is always there. All right. So thank you all for engaging in those breakout groups about expectations, support, time, and tools. That's always a great way to reflect on your own vision and how you can implement and utilize this walkthrough tool or any of the other resources that we provided to you during this training session to leverage and lift up best practices of math in your schools and districts. So like we sent out in the chat earlier, we're going to push out again your feedback. Thank you in advance for your feedback. We really, truly do appreciate it. We read it. I read it, I look into it and see how I can be a better presenter, a better facilitator for y'all. So if you don't mind, please take a few moments to take that survey reflection to help drive at our next session. Our next drop-in session is happening, I believe, Katie, on April 12th, correct?
Yes.
Okay, April 12th. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, please feel free to do so. Myself, and Rhiannon will be back to present at that next session. There are two more different drop-in leaders PD sessions. One in April, two exact same contents in April, 2 different dates for you to choose from and times. And then there's also one in May as well. So I look forward to seeing you all there. And feel free to leave your honest feedback in the survey. And let me see. In the meantime, here is my email and Rhiannon's email. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You will get copies of the PowerPoint and all of our resources that we pushed out to you today. And thank you all so much for your time. We know it is precious. We appreciate you, and we hope to see you again next month. All right, thank you all. Feel free to hop off. And thank you again for doing the survey. Really appreciate it. Bye. Have a great one, y'all. Thank you. Bye.